Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Raven's Prophecy. The Elder Trials, chapters 26 to the finale, by Mark and James Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Valen used his magic to create shields, curved, nearly transparent images, with hues of blue and red, ancient forgotten runes written in circular formations. With his shields, he was able to formulate retreat for the families, in particular, children. The Skollreaver archers were targeting the sorcerer mercilessly, their fear of magic, making the Greytree Druid their prime target. Scores of arrows were drawn towards him with pinpoint accuracy, Valen barely able to keep up under the onslaught. The effort it took to create a shield was taxing. In the space of minutes, he had created 100, and the magic required for such a feat was beginning to take a heavy toll. A child's scream diverted his attention. Valen turned to see a reaver plucking up a wailing young girl from the side of her dead mother. The reaver was stocky with heavy muscle. He flashed blackened teeth when he laughed at the girl's misery. Valen's jaw went tense as he looked around, his eyes narrowing when he found what he was looking for. A tomahawk protruding from the chest of a dead reaver. Valen gestured and murmured an old familiar spell. The tomahawk shuddered, then flew from Deadman, spinning fast. It traveled at a straight line towards the reaver carrying the screaming child, who was now dangling from his hand, in the other a vicious-looking dagger. The reaver showed the dirty tip to the child, eliciting a terrified look from the girl. Then just as he was about to stick the end into the girl's eye, the tomahawk struck its intended target, the back of the reaver's neck. He screamed in agony. He sunk to the ground, trying to pull the blade from his flesh. Dark blood flowing freely between his fingers, he slumped forward dead. "Run, little one!" Valen yelled. The little girl just stared around in shock. He started to run towards her when an arrow struck his calf. Valen roared as he clutched his leg in agony, the head of the arrow sticking out from the broken skin. But instead of succumbing to his wounds, he glared around at the archers who had disembarked their boat and were now warily approaching. Valen turned, ignoring the excruciating pain in his leg. He raised up his palm towards the oncoming threat. "Espiritus Demonicus!" Valen roared and struck his palm with a clenched fist. There was a boom, like thunder. White lightning erupted from the sorcerer and struck the 5 archers, who dropped to the ground screaming, blood pouring from their eyes and ears, their torment short-lived, as they twitched momentarily, then died. Valen smiled at his victory. Then he too dropped to the ground, his breath coming in ragged gasps, exhausted. "Ah, a living member of the Star Chamber. I thought your order was all gone. How interesting." An amused voice cut through the dark. It sounded like metal scraping on stone. Valen pushed himself up from the dirt and peered into the night. An old woman dressed in the hide of a black wolf, her gray hair tied up with crow's feathers, walked slowly forward. She leant on a staff made of bone and steel. "I know you, crone. Zaire, one of the Doom siblings," Valen growled, attempting to get to his feet. "Can't say we've ever met, but I do know of you, Valen," the woman said and grinned. It was a horrible black mess. Zaire hummed, and the air crackled around her. She hummed again, and a bolt of black energy shot out from the head of her staff, which was shaped in a pentagram. Valen barely had time or the strength to deflect the beam. It shattered his shield but did no other damage. Zaire let out a cackle so rancid it could almost wither the trees around her. "If that's the best you have, then this will be over pretty quick," Zaire said, her eyes gleaming in anticipation. Ulrich picked himself from the ground, then grabbed his fallen axe. At his feet the corpses of several Skollreavers, all crushed from his mighty strength. He glanced about the battlefield. There were bodies from both sides littered like trash. The Reavers had brought significant numbers, and the people of Greytree had been unprepared. A lot had managed to flee, others not so lucky. The clash of steel on steel focused his attention. Lord Asolf and his men had managed to push back and defeat a score of the enemy. But there were still others ready to take up the call of combat. He was about to lend his axe to their skirmish, when out of the corner of his eye he saw some of the competitors from this year's Elder Trials. They had armed themselves and were striking out against a number of the Reavers. They had created a defensive ring, but the Reavers were wearing them down. Men against boys and girls. Have these craven beasts no honor? Ulrich cursed, his anger growing. Let us see how you do against a real warrior. Ulrich hissed and hefted his axe, and ran towards the Reavers. We can't hold them much longer, Den panted. He had joined Erik and the others, along with Bjorg and Torben, and had managed to take out a small number of enemy Reavers. But by their own actions, this had attracted more warriors, and now they were way out of their depth. We can, and we will, Erik growled, slicing away the thrust of a spear tip. The years under Asolf's tutelage had served him well, having dispatched several Reavers himself, but he was still only a boy, with a boy's stamina, and it was starting to run out. Kill the large boy! A Reaver yelled, singling out Erik as the problem. Erik was about to yell something back, when a roar broke the stalemate. Everyone, including the Reavers, turned to see Ulrich Mace punch through their ranks with his giant axe. It almost seemed that every time he swung, a Reaver went down. The teenage kids watched in awe as Ulrich single-handedly took on nearly a dozen armed Reavers, his strength and battle prowess seeming to possess almost god-like properties. Astrid and Ivar made their way towards where the main focus of the battle was taking place. I don't know about this, Ivar said, for what seemed the 100th time. Astrid tried to ignore him, but even she was beginning to question her role here. Since she had incinerated the 3 Reavers earlier, they had fought off 2 others, and managed to evade twice that many, who were busy smashing and destroying everything in sight. Lord Asolf is going to need all the help he can get. We have to help the others. If they fail, everybody will die, Astrid said, more to herself than to Ivar. A loud noise that sounded like a thunderstorm demanded their attention. Astrid looked to the star-filled sky. I think that was Valen, Ivar said in awe. I think you may be right, Astrid agreed, and grabbed Ivar by the arm and dragged him towards the source of the noise. They arrived at the location of the celebration. Only now it looked more like an abattoir. Dozens were lying dead everywhere. Not just Reavers, but citizens of Greytree. Men, women, and children, killed without compassion, or thought to who or why. Just straight-out murder by bloodthirsty bullies, Astrid thought. She surveyed the area. Lord Asolf appeared to be holding his own against a team of raiders. She didn't like the man, but couldn't help but admire his warrior's skill. She then saw Valen struggling against a gray-haired witch. The woman appeared mad as a rabid weasel, laughing wildly as she cast energy at Valen, who was struggling under her constant barrage. We have to help him, Astrid said. Against that? Are you mad? Ivar said, incredulous. No, but she's clearly very powerful. If Valen should fall, Astrid said. That's a witch. We don't have the power, Ivar insisted. About that, Astrid said. She didn't try to explain. Instead, she strode out towards Valen and raised her own hand and took a deep breath. Here goes nothing, she muttered and concentrated, as she did before. But instead of fire appearing in her hand, a discharge of green lightning snaked out from her fingertips and struck the old woman side on. The witch let out a scream of absolute pain. The power continued to course through from Astrid into the witch, rippling across her body like a giant electrical whip. But instead of dropping from the attack, the old witch grunted and held her ground. Valen managed to regain his composure, at first not sure what had caused the witch to stop her attack. Then through the dust, he saw Astrid was off to his flank, and it appeared she was engaging in her own attack on Zaire Doom, who was refusing to go down. Hope filled his heart. Keep doing what you're doing, Volin called out. Astrid diverted her gaze towards the sorcerer, long enough to acknowledge him with a nod of her head, her jaw set firm. Volin steadied himself, and with all the strength he could muster, he himself summoned a bolt of pure energy, the same as Astrid, only his color blue. The two bolts of mystical energy ensnared the struggling witch, who now looked purple in their combined power. "This is far from over!" Zaire stammered through gritted teeth, then screamed in rage. There was a massive backlash, as it appeared that Zaire exploded. Both Volin and Astrid's power was disrupted. They shielded their eyes from the thrown-up dust and smoke, and when it finally cleared, they witnessed a large crow flying from the scene. Both Lord Asulf and his men, as well as Ulrich, turned to see what had caused the explosion, most only seeing Volin and the Reaver Witch transforming into a great black bird and fleeing the scene. This was at the same time as the remaining Reavers, who lost all hope as their mage deserted them. Not one for wasting an opportunity, Lord Asulf and his men dispatched the raiders quickly, and without remorse. Ulrich also turned to see the loud commotion, and from his vantage point witnessed his daughter wielding arcane power. "Astrid," Ulrich whispered, and for that brief moment his attention was distracted for a crucial moment. A Reaver, badly wounded, kneeling to one side, he thrust his longsword into Ulrich's side, the giant blacksmith letting out a scream and dropping to his knees. Astrid, still dazed by her confrontation with Zaire, turned at the sound of the familiar voice that screamed in pain, and in that split second, the world as she knew it ended. "Father!" she screamed and raced to his side. Kneeling next to him, she could hear his ragged breaths. With great care, she rolled him onto his back. "Father, can you hear me?" Astrid begged. Ulrich groaned and opened his eyes, a small hint of a smile on his face, despite his obvious pain. "I'm sorry," Ulrich gasped. "No, don't be sorry," Astrid replied, tears welling in her eyes. Ulrich reached up and gently touched her cheek. "Please, don't cry," Ulrich labored. Erik and the others had also crowded around, a small amount of guilt and admiration at the man who had saved them and was now dying. "You can't die. I won't allow it," Astrid said angrily, wiping away her tears. Lord Asulf strode towards the group and looked down regretfully at Ulrich before his commander instincts kicked in. "Erik, take your group and anyone else you can find that knows how to use a sword and start checking the south side of the village. We may have won this battle, but I'm betting that there are still a few of them in Greytree. I only need one prisoner. Kill any others that you find," Lord Asulf instructed, before departing with his own soldiers towards the north side of the village. Erik stood there a moment awkwardly. "I'm sorry," he said, Astrid not entirely sure who the apology was directed to, and before she could answer, he too left with the others, including Eivor, whose eyes were red. He touched her shoulder before departing. Ulrich suddenly grabbed her hand, his eyes clear. "I don't have much time left," Ulrich gasped. Astrid was about to say something, but he waved her silent. "The gods haven't given us much time together, but I regret nothing up until this night. No matter what happens, know that I love you," Ulrich said through gritted teeth. "No, father," Astrid said, crying freely. "You... Volin," Ulrich said with iron in his voice. Astrid turned startled. She hadn't been aware that the sorcerer was standing beside her. "Promise me you'll look after my girl. Teach and help her find her potential. You owe me," Ulrich added. There was a long pause. "I promise, blacksmith," Volin replied. "Don't promise. Just do." Astrid beseeched the sorcerer, who could only shake his head in sorrow. "It's too late," Ulrich whispered. His breathing was shallow. Way too shallow. He beckoned her close. "Look after your mother. She will need your strength in the times to come," Ulrich whispered, and before Astrid could reply, he took in one last great breath, then fell silent, his eyes closing peacefully. "No!" Astrid cried, and threw herself across his great chest, as racking sobs of grief overtook her. All Volin could do was watch and contemplate. Chapter 27. The next few days were a blur, not just to Astrid, but to many who lost loved ones in the Skollreaver's raid. The Thorn Trinity had decided to conduct one large ceremony for all that had lost their lives, and in the 2 days leading up to it, the families carefully prepared those that had died for their journey into the afterlife. Placed on small canoes, they were dressed in their finery, and on their chests a personal item. For the men, it was their personal weapon. Ulrich had his mighty axe. The families of those that had departed lined themselves along the water's edge and quietly said their goodbyes. Druid held Astrid's hand and tried to present herself as a symbol of stability. It took everything she had not to weep at that moment. "Farewell, my beloved. There will never be another," Druid said solemnly, then gently urged her daughter. Astrid stared down at the man who had meant everything to her. Since his death, she had cried a river, and even then the tears kept coming, despite the fact that she felt empty inside. "I will honor my promise to you. Goodbye," Astrid said, brushing away the tears. Lord Raga's voice broke the silence. "We who have faced tragedy and despair beg the gods and ask that they deliver our loved ones to the golden forests of Valadia, where they will be reunited with past loved ones and someday await our own arrival." "By the mercy of the gods," Lord Raga said. "By the mercy of the gods," the village said in one voice, then one at a time. The families of those that had passed gently pushed the boats into the water, the current slowly taking them away. Lord Asolf commanded his archers to light their arrows, and in unison they fired into the sky. Like 100 flaming birds, they descended onto the water, striking the canoes and setting them aflame. Astrid was the last to remain by the water, watching until the very last canoe had sunk beneath the dark surface. She took the long way home, not wanting to face her mother and be reminded of their loss. When night eventually came, Astrid returned to her father's forge, needing the familiarity of the place she loved most. Lighting a candle, she walked around her father's hut, imagining that he would walk in at any moment. Something caught her eye, a bundle on one of the benches. Astrid placed the candle down and picked up the wrapped package. It was heavy, a note resting on top. With a racing heart, she realized that it had been written by her father, for her. "My dearest Astrid, I just wanted to congratulate you on your performance at the trials. I am and have always been proud of your fierce and loving nature. Please don't ever change. I look forward to our years ahead. I hope you like your surprise. It has taken me months and is easily my greatest creation. Never hide who you really are. All my love." Father Astrid dropped the note and stared at the wrapped bundle. The realization that the secret project her father had been working on all this time was actually for her. She tore open the brown paper in a frenzy. The first thing she saw was a leather-bound book, her father's book. It detailed every trick and procedure Ulrich had ever learned. She knew the book well, only now it had her name etched onto its cover. Tears once again welled in her eyes. She placed the book down and removed the heavy object within. It was a hammer, 3 foot long in length. The handle had been beautifully wrapped in deerskin leather, the base engraved with the skull of a raven. The head of the hammer had been crafted in rare dwarven iron, much sought after for its unbelievable strength and lightness, rumors that it had the ability to absorb and disrupt magic. The head had been carved extensively in runes and symbols. Astrid stared hard at the last thing her father had made. It was both beautiful and amazing in its detail. Astrid carefully picked it up and turned it over in her hands. She couldn't believe how it felt. It was like she was regaining the use of a lost limb, as if it had always been a part of her. With little effort, she swung the hammer at the anvil to her right. A shining spark of light flew up, with a clear metallic ring. She smiled broadly. There was one last thing she had to do. Druid sat alone at the dining table. She was no longer crying, but the hurt inside numbed her beyond belief. Astrid had been gone a while. She had heard her daughter, moving around in her father's forge, obviously trying to cope with her grief. It was to be expected, Druid thought. She would wait another hour before she would go in after her. She would try to respect the young girl's space, but this was also a time where family would need to pull together. As her mind drifted, the front door opened, and in walked Astrid. Only she wasn't looking like her usual self. Instead of her dark hair looking messy and covering one eye, it had been pulled back and braided, much like a warrior shield maiden. There was still hurt in her eyes, but there was something else, courage and determination. Also in her hands, a hammer, beautiful and strong. All at once, Druid knew. They embraced. There were going to be tough times ahead, but they also both knew that they had each other, and for now, that would be enough. Epilogue. At the same time that Astrid and Druid were coming to terms with their grief, there was a secret meeting occurring in the center of town. The Thorn Trinity. Lords Raga and Forsberg were waiting impatiently for the third of their number to attend. The weight of recent problems had been nearly crippling to many in town. The third of their number, who was currently not in attendance, had called them together tonight. He had hinted at something dark and unpleasant. "Where the hell is he? Neither of us should have to wait at his beck and call," Lord Forsberg grumbled. "I'm sure this is important. You know the man is nothing but grim," Lord Rag replied, sipping on wine. It was obvious that it wasn't his first for the evening. "Of course it's important," a voice said from the darkness. Lord Astolf emerged from the end of the hall, his boots echoing as he walked towards them. Lord Rag choked on his beverage. "My God, man, must you do that?" he spat. Astolf ignored him. "Since the attack, I have been scouring the area for any sign on why the Skollreavers were here," Lord Astolf said. "It was a raiding party, nothing more," Lord Rag annoyed. "He's right, Yako. You're wasting time on things we already know," Lord Forsberg agreed. Lord Astolf was having none of it. "This was no mere raiding party," Lord Astolf said. "Then what was it?" Lord Rag insisted. "I have searched the bodies of the dead, and 2 of the men found bore these markings," Lord Astolf said, and held up a large patch of tattooed skin. "These runes indicate that of a war chief. A war chief would never go out on standard raid. This is something else," Lord Astolf said. "What?" Forsberg asked, suddenly intrigued. "The attack was well planned and orchestrated. My men also found maps and information about the Elder Trials. They knew when to attack, and when we would be most vulnerable. They planned to wipe us all out. Raiders believe us to be cattle. They raid and take some, not all. That way they can keep coming back. The only time they decimate entire villages is when they are looking for something specific and want nothing else," Lord Astolf said. "What do we have that they want?" Lord Raga asked. "That's the problem. I have no idea," Lord Astolf said with a narrowed gaze. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope you enjoyed the finale of Raven's Prophecy, The Elder Trials, and return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next tale awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.